Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. Alice walked slowly along the avenue where the trees were already casting long shadows. She was returning from the shop. It was the middle of September, the time of the gentle Indian summer. Nature generously gifted the town its last warm days. The leaves on the trees were already touched with yellow, the air filled with the scent of sun-warmed grasses. Mothers with strollers and toddlers strolled leisurely along the neat, as if swept paths. The shopping bag hung heavy, pulling at Alice's arm. This evening she had to make cheese soup for Eleanor Smith, and she also needed to finish her test paper for tomorrow. The mistress of the house tolerated no delays. Alice now studied independently under the watchful eye of Eleanor Smith. The latter, a former teacher, turned out to be a strict but fair mentor. The results were evident. Alice felt completely ready for the university exams. Only a few months remained until then. She couldn't wait to be a student again, even if it was distance learning. A slight furrow appeared on Alice's brow. Her thoughts returned to the past, to that difficult time when life seemed to have collapsed on her. How had she managed to stand firm then, not break under the weight of the misfortunes that had befallen her? The girl herself couldn't find the answer. But now everything was different. Life was gradually getting better. She even had her own room, small perhaps, but so cosy, with a window overlooking a wide, almost rural street. The house where Eleanor Smith lived stood in a quiet private sector. In the morning you could hear a rooster crow here, and in the afternoon boys rode bicycles along the sleepy, almost deserted streets. Elderly women sat on benches by the front gardens. Peace reigned all around. It was hard to believe that not far away stood multi-story buildings. An endless stream of cars rushed along the roads, and people were rushing somewhere. Here, time seemed to slow its pace. The district was not considered elite, but Alice had come to love it with all her heart. Alice unlocked the gate and stepped into the small cherry orchard. Duplex bounded out to meet her with a joyful bark. The dog sniffed the bags, wagging his tail energetically. Alice scratched him behind the ears with a tender smile and took out a treat she had saved for him from her bag. Duplex yelped with delight. His sincere joy always warmed Alice's soul. Going up to the porch, she opened the door. "I'm home!" the girl announced loudly. "Put the kettle on. The series is starting soon," came Eleanor Smith's voice from the depths of the house. The elderly mistress of the house was a distant relative of Alice's. The girl didn't delve into the intricacies of kinship ties, knowing only that Eleanor Smith's children, Robert and Sarah, were her mother's third cousins. Before the tragic day that happened 2 years ago, Alice hadn't even suspected their existence. Their first and only meeting took place at her mother's funeral. Then, in grief, Alice had to shake hands with many unfamiliar faces, among whom were these very distant relatives. From the sudden rush of memories, Alice involuntarily shivered. The anniversary of that mournful day was approaching. 2 years ago, it had also been September, but not at all like this one, warm and sunny. That autumn had been gloomy and rainy, with heavy clouds covering the sky for several weeks straight. Alice's mother suffered from heart pain, constantly measured her blood pressure, and took pills. She rarely went to doctors, only when it was completely unbearable. Several times she was taken to the hospital with attacks. Alice, still just a girl, stayed with neighbours, and her heart squeezed with fear at every phone call. What if it was from the hospital? What if the worst had happened to Mom? The fear of losing her mother haunted Alice from early childhood. A sick heart, lack of means and time for treatment, and most importantly, the necessity of raising her daughter alone without any support from relatives. Alice didn't know her father. Her mother said he was a smart, handsome, intelligent man who had come to their town for a short time. "That's how it happened, and I don't regret anything," she used to say. "A daughter from such a man is true happiness." Alice felt that her mother most likely still loved him, although he, having left, didn't even suspect her existence. "Why didn't you try to find him?" Alice would ask, especially in moments when the absence of a father figure was so acutely felt. But her mother would just shake her head. "Why? He probably has his own life, a family. He didn't promise anything. And you are only mine." Her mother was everything to Alice, the closest and dearest person. She always found the right words of support, knew how to dispel any sadness, and sensed when it was best not to interfere. Working as a cleaner in a shopping centre and in the evenings as a dishwasher in a cafe, her mother worked tirelessly. She had no education. Her childhood was spent in an orphanage. Her parents led an antisocial lifestyle, and she was removed from the family. But she didn't receive housing from the state, as she was listed as the owner of a share in her grandmother's house. "But if you had a grandmother, why did you end up in an orphanage?" Alice wondered, listening to her story. "There were relatives," her mother replied, "but no one needed a problematic child. My parents drank. They didn't care about me. I grew up like a street child, so they sent me to an orphanage. And then there was a fire. The house burned down. My parents and guests burned. That's how I became a complete orphan." After leaving the orphanage, Alice's mother almost immediately dropped out of culinary college. She needed to earn a living. For a while, she lived with her grandmother, but in the old cramped house, where many relatives were already crammed, she was not welcome. In the end, she was paid a tiny share for the house and, essentially, kicked out. "Of course they cheated me," her mother sighed. "But I, an 18-year-old girl, understood nothing about life. I was left homeless, without support, without education. I had to become a cleaner. I didn't even know how to wash floors properly. They didn't do that in the orphanage. And at my grandmother's, it was a completely different way of life. I learned everything on the fly." She rented a tiny room in a wooden barracks, found a job, and made friends with neighbours. Life went on. Sometimes the thought of continuing her studies crossed her mind, but as soon as she remembered the lectures and classes, the desire vanished. "Why the extra hassle? I'm living well enough as it is. And no one told me, a foolish girl, that education is the most important thing," she often repeated to Alice. "So you, daughter, study hard. Maybe you'll make something of yourself. Your father was smart, educated. You have every chance." Alice did indeed study diligently. She was always among the best in her class, and studying came easily to her. She participated in Olympiads and often won prizes. Her mother sincerely rejoiced in her successes, was proud of her talented daughter, and carefully kept all her certificates in a special folder. Her mother often said that Alice's birthday was the happiest day of her life. "You were a wonderful baby, blue-eyed, with fan-like eyelashes. The whole maternity ward came to look at you." Raising her daughter alone was incredibly difficult, but her mother managed, taking on more and more part-time jobs. She worked from morning until late evening, sometimes without days off or holidays, just so Alice would have everything she needed, so she wouldn't lack anything compared to other children. They continued to live in that tiny room in the old barracks. Alice liked it there, but her mother dreamed of more decent housing. Alice grew up a happy child. She had many friends in the barracks, and they spent whole days in the overgrown yard. In the summer, they would only run home for a quick bite and then rush back outside in search of adventure. Most of the children's parents also worked a lot, so the kids were left to themselves and enjoyed their freedom. They didn't care that they lived in a poor neighbourhood. They didn't know any other life. The only shadow on Alice's childhood was constant anxiety for her mother. She often felt unwell. She would turn pale, her lips would turn blue, cold sweat would appear on her forehead, her breathing would become wheezing and hoarse. Sometimes the attack would pass on its own, sometimes a pill helped, and sometimes Alice had to run to a neighbour to call an ambulance. Her mother was occasionally taken to the hospital, but more often she refused hospitalization. "Mary, what are you doing? Have some pity on yourself," the neighbour would plead. "How can I go to the hospital? My job is unofficial, no sick leave. If I don't bring money, what will we eat? I have to think about my daughter." "If you're thinking about your daughter, take care of your health. Go to the hospital. Alice can stay with us." Later. First I'll save up some money. But later never came. After another attack, seeing her daughter's fear, her mother would smile and promise, "Nothing will happen to me while you're little. I know what an orphanage is like, and I won't let you end up there." "But your heart, it needs treatment. What if you're gone?" "That won't be soon. My health is strong. Everything will be fine, you'll see." And for a while everything really was fine. Alice successfully finished school and got into university on a scholarship, choosing the prestigious Faculty of Economics. Her mother's joy knew no bounds. She called all the neighbours, sharing her pride and happiness. People congratulated her, sincerely happy for her cherished dream coming true. "Just study diligently, daughter," her mother instructed. "I feel you will achieve a lot." Alice aimed for straight A's, dreamed of a red diploma and a high-paying job. The future seemed bright and full of opportunities, and she truly succeeded. Thanks to her perseverance, even difficult subjects became manageable. In her first year, not a single B, only A's. Her scholarship was even increased. But at the beginning of her second year, what she feared most happened. In the evening, her mother suffered another, particularly severe attack. She instantly turned pale, her lips blue, her breathing became hoarse, convulsive. She was suffocating. The sight was terrible. Alice called an ambulance. The crew arrived quickly, but every minute of waiting seemed like an eternity. Mom had never been so ill, the apartment filled with people in sea green uniforms. They gently pushed Alice aside, opened their bags, and bent over her mother. From their anxious faces, from snippets of phrases, the girl understood that the situation was critical. Her heart squeezed with fear, chills ran down her spine, her head swam, her legs felt alien, like cotton. Never before had Alice experienced such horror. But somewhere deep inside, hope still flickered. Alice clung to it with all her might. Yes, it was very bad now, but the doctors would save Mom. And then everything would be different. She would no longer let her refuse treatment. She would take everything into her own hands. Mom was still young, not even 40. Suddenly, the paramedic sharply asked her to leave. The situation was worsening. Alice heard snippets of phrases. "Won't make it to the hospital. Cardiac arrest." Terrible, chilling words. Obeying, Alice went into the corridor, sank to the floor, covered her face with her hands, trying to hide in the darkness. "My condolences," said the doctor who came out, removing his mask. "We did everything we could. You need to sign the papers." Alice, it seemed, screamed, piercingly, desperately. Hot tears streamed from her eyes. The terrible reality slowly seeped into her consciousness, and then the world swam, spun, and the girl fell into darkness. She came to on the sofa at her neighbour's, Aunt Carol's. "Poor girl," she sighed. "So young, and now you'll have to go through life alone." Aunt Carol helped with the funeral arrangements. Many people Alice didn't know came, her mother's colleagues, friends, distant relatives. It seemed she suddenly had many relatives she had never heard of. Mom sometimes mentioned them, but Alice hadn't paid attention. Among those who came were Robert and Sarah, her mother's third cousins. Well-groomed, clearly well off. They handed her an envelope with a small sum, offered perfunctory condolences, and wished her to be strong. Alice looked at them with timid hope. Maybe they would offer help. She, lost and crushed by grief, needed support so much. But apparently, the relatives considered their duty done, expressed condolences once more, and hurried away. A week after the funeral, Alice faced harsh reality. How was she to live? She needed to earn money. She was 18, an adult. But how to combine work with studies that took up all her time? "You'll probably have to drop out of university," Aunt Carol said sadly. "It's a shame. Your mother was so proud of you." "There's no other way," Alice agreed. She understood that otherwise she wouldn't be able to pay for housing and buy food. And so it happened. Alice left her studies and, ironically, got a job as a cleaner in the very same shopping centre where her mother had worked. A year passed, a year of hard, exhausting work, a year of longing and pain for her mother. Alice barely made ends meet. Physical labour was draining, but the emptiness was even heavier. A world without Mom, a world where you are alone with all the difficulties. Alice tried not to remember the past, but it caught up with her. She had to accept. Life can be cruel, unpredictable. One day, returning home late after a shift, with an aching back and sore hands, dreaming only of collapsing onto the sofa, Alice saw two people at her door. In the semi-darkness of the entrance, she was initially frightened, but when they stepped into the light, she recognized them, Robert and Sarah, the distant relatives from the funeral. "Hello," Sarah smiled, a well-groomed woman of about 45 in an expensive coat with a subtle scent of exquisite perfume. Robert stood slightly behind her, shifting awkwardly. "Hello," Alice breathed out, completely stunned. She hadn't expected their visit. "We've come to see you," Robert said. "On business." "On business? With them?" Alice was puzzled. Embarrassed, she unlocked the door, letting the guests in, and frantically wondered if she had managed to tidy up. Fortunately, the apartment was clean. Sarah and Robert looked around. "Where should we go?" Sarah asked with an awkward smile. "Here," Alice pointed to the sofa. They sat down, Alice on a chair opposite. A heavy silence hung in the air. Alice was about to offer tea to break the silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Well, how are you? How are you managing on your own?" Alice shrugged. It was strange that they only remembered her now. "Slowly," she replied. "I'm working as a cleaner, like Mum. I had to drop out of university." "Poor girl," Sarah shook her head. It was hard to tell if the sympathy was sincere. "Never mind, you'll still have time to study," Robert said carelessly. "Yes, I plan to save money and re-enroll." "Good plan," Sarah approved. "But honestly, from the look of things, you barely have enough money." "It's enough," Alice countered. "I pay for housing. I'm not starving. I'm managing." "We have a proposition for you," Robert said directly. Sarah shot him a reproachful look. "A proposition?" Alice was surprised. "Yes," Sarah nodded, feigning friendliness again. "We want to offer you to live with Mom, for free, with meals and a small salary. It could be a way out for you." "What does that mean?" Alice didn't understand. "I'll explain now," Sarah sighed. She told her about her mother, Eleanor Smith. She had worked her whole life at an economic college, in the dean's office and teaching. Energetic, strong-willed, used to deciding everything herself. Retiring at 75 was hard for her. She didn't want to leave work. It seemed everything would fall apart without it. But age took its toll, and Eleanor Smith had to stay home. Then she threw herself into domestic life. Renovations, the garden, the vegetable patch, a choir for the elderly. Her active nature demanded application. But it wasn't enough. She missed work, the feeling of being needed. "What about grandchildren?" Alice asked, remembering her dream of a caring grandmother. "Why doesn't she spend time with them?" Robert chuckled. "Our children are grown up now," Sarah replied. "There was a time when we needed help, and they needed a grandmother. But for Mum, work was more important then. She loved her college too much. So, essentially, they are strangers to the grandchildren." An old resentment seeped into Sarah's voice. Alice couldn't understand how one could be indifferent to their grandchildren. "Anyway, Mum's health started to fail," Robert continued in an even tone, without apparent emotion. "Her blood pressure was erratic, she forgot to take her pills, and she worked too much in the garden in any weather. The result, a stroke." Sarah sighed heavily. "Yes, a stroke," she confirmed. "The neighbour found her in the garden. Doctors fought for her life. The prognosis was bad, but she survived." "Survived?" Robert scoffed. "She's confined to bed." "Don't say that," Sarah snapped at him. "She has weak legs and an arm, but she walks with support, and her mind is clear. She just constantly needs someone nearby to help with food, cleaning, take her out for a walk." "She flatly refuses a caregiver," Robert added with annoyance. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "She doesn't want a stranger in the house. She doesn't trust them." "And you?" Alice asked. "We can't," Sarah replied. "We have work, families. Robert is often on business trips. We can't sit with her constantly. We tried to find a caregiver, but Mum won't accept anyone." "You can't trust strangers," Robert quoted his mother. "Who knows what's on their minds?" "Therefore," Sarah lowered her voice to an ingratiating tone, "we need not a stranger, but one of our own, a relative." "Me?" Alice guessed. "Of course you," Sarah confirmed. "You're the ideal option. Young, energetic, and most importantly, one of us. And frankly, you need help. You'll live in a big house, won't pay rent or for food. The care isn't complicated. We'll pay you a salary, you can save up and go back to university. And Mom—" Sarah fell silent meaningfully. Alice understood the hint. Mom wouldn't live forever. This bluntness made her uncomfortable. "You'll have your own room," Robert added. "Meals. Essentially, just live here, do your own thing. Just help sometimes. Feed her, wash her, take her outside. Ideal conditions." "I need to think about it," Alice said. "What is there to think about?" Sarah exclaimed. "Leave your number. I'll call you back." "Okay, but don't delay. Mom is being discharged soon. We need a decision." Left alone, Alice sank into thought. She had no idea what caring for a sick person involved. Could she handle it? What if Eleanor Smith turned out to be capricious or completely helpless? The relatives might have embellished the situation, but this was a real chance. Caring for an elderly woman was probably easier than washing floors all day. And a salary, plus free housing and food, this would allow her to save up for her studies. When would such a chance come again? Alice made her decision. Without waiting for the morning, she called Sarah in the evening. "Excellent!" Sarah was delighted. "The right choice. Mum is being discharged on Monday. We'll come for you right after that. Pack your things." "Agreed," Alice replied. Her life was changing dramatically, for better or worse, time would tell. After all, she could always leave. On the appointed Monday, Robert arrived for Alice in a luxurious black SUV. It was clear these relatives were not poor. He drove her to the private sector. Here, dilapidated houses stood alongside real mansions. Eleanor Smith's house turned out to be solid, well built, but without frills. Alice's attention was drawn to the garden, cherry trees, bright flowers in beds, neat rows of vegetables, and everywhere cute garden figures, gnomes, hedgehogs, rabbits. This brought a smile to her face. Mum loved working in the garden, Robert explained, noticing her gaze. Now, I suppose everything will fall into disrepair. No, it won't, Alice thought, feeling pity for the labours of the unfamiliar woman. It was obvious how much this garden meant to her. Robert led Alice into the house. She looked around with interest. The furnishings were old-fashioned, reminiscent of films about Soviet life. A round table in the living room, a china cabinet with dishes, knitted doilies. But it was cosy, clean, and pleasant. Alice liked it here. Robert led her further. Through a narrow corridor, they entered a bright, spacious room. The first thing that struck Alice was the books. 2 walls from floor to ceiling were lined with bookshelves. A real library. Classics, detective stories, encyclopedias, many books on economics. Eleanor Smith had taught, after all. Opposite the window stood a large desk, piled with papers. Against another wall was a bed. Eleanor Smith was sitting on it. At the sight of her, Alice involuntarily felt awkward. An authoritative, piercing gaze, eyebrows furrowed in displeasure. She sat straight, tense, and looked at Alice with unconcealed reproach. "Mum, meet Alice," Sarah entered. "She's Mary's daughter. She'll be staying with you." "I don't need a caregiver," Eleanor Smith replied stubbornly. "My hands obey me. A little exercise and I'll be fine." "The doctor said not to leave you alone," Robert reminded her. "Don't argue." It was clear this wasn't their first conversation. Alice had expected Eleanor Smith to be afraid of loneliness herself, but she seemed to think otherwise. Sarah sighed tiredly. "Mum, please, Alice will stay for now. When you rehabilitate," she corrected herself under her mother's stern gaze, "she'll leave, that's all." Eleanor Smith tried to stand up, but her legs didn't obey. Alice instinctively rushed to her, offering her shoulder. Eleanor Smith smiled bitterly, but leaned on her. "All right," she agreed. "Let her stay. But only until I deal with the consequences, and I will deal with them. Believe me, you won't get your wish." "Who would doubt it?" Sarah smiled with relief. "You always get your way," Robert added. Robert and Sarah showed Alice around the house. 4 rooms, the living room, Eleanor Smith's bedroom, the former children's rooms, and a small vacant room where there was probably a gym, a wall bar, a pull-up bar, an exercise bike. "Dad used to work out," Robert explained. "He'd say, 'Movement is life.' He tried to get me into it, but it didn't work." Sarah teased her brother, looking at his stomach. "It didn't work," Robert agreed. "You'll live here," Sarah said. "You can work out if you want. Consider it a gym membership." Both were in a good mood. The matter was settled. "You'll sleep on the sofa. Bed linen is in the cupboard." Sarah wrote detailed instructions in a thick notebook: medications, masseur's schedule, daily routine. "Call if anything," she said. "We'll transfer your salary to your card once a month. Buy groceries and medicine with Mum's money, she knows." "Mum can be capricious," Robert added. Sarah shot him a stern look. "Don't listen to him. Mum has a temper, of course, but she's in her right mind. The stroke didn't change that. Everything will be fine. Call me if anything." Robert and Sarah quickly left. It seemed to Alice that they had shed a burden of responsibility with relief, leaving their mother in the care of a distant relative. Strange relationship. Alice took a deep breath and went to introduce herself. She really wanted to make a good impression. "My little birds have flown away," Eleanor Smith smiled, sitting in an armchair. "They've pushed their mother onto a young girl and they're happy." "But they care about you," Alice countered. "Yes, they care. They went to work," Eleanor Smith chuckled. "Ah, girl, naive. You don't know anything yet." "Well, shall we get acquainted? Alice, you said? Maybe we'll make some tea. Let's sit and talk." "Excellent idea." Alice was delighted, hurrying to the kitchen. She boiled the kettle, found some sweets. It felt strange to be in charge in someone else's house, but that's what she was invited for. She helped Eleanor Smith walk to the kitchen. She tried to stand straight, pretending her legs obeyed her, but they didn't. The weakness was obvious. Alice understood how hard it was for her, used to being strong and active, to accept helplessness. Her heart ached with pity. "My favourite sweets," Eleanor Smith exclaimed happily. "Mine too," Alice smiled. "You're just a child." Eleanor Smith looked at her carefully. "How old are you?" 19. "And you look younger, like a teenager." "That's from Mom. She always looked younger too." "Oh, Mary!" Eleanor Smith shook her head. "I barely knew her. I saw her a couple of times in childhood. I didn't keep in touch with her mother, my cousin. She lived not the best life." "Excuse me, that's your grandmother." "I know that story," Mom told me, Alice said. "That's why she ended up in an orphanage. Her parents drank, didn't take care of her." "I often thought about it," Eleanor Smith continued. "Perhaps I should have taken Mary in. My children were a little older. But back then, I felt like I had broken free from that cycle. I didn't want to return to the past. And I didn't find out about the orphanage right away. I thought her paternal grandmother had taken her." "She didn't," Alice replied quietly. The conversation was unpleasant. It seemed Eleanor Smith was justifying herself for not helping the daughter of her deceased relative, although, in truth, she wasn't obligated to. Eleanor Smith asked Alice about her life, studies, and work. Listening to the difficulties after her mother's death, she sighed regretfully. There was no trace of her former haughtiness. Before Alice sat a sensitive, attentive woman. Alice felt sympathy for her. Upon learning that Alice had to drop out of the Faculty of Economics, Eleanor Smith transformed. Her eyes sparkled. "You'll re-enroll next year," she declared, "for distance learning. By then I'll be stronger, and you won't have to sit with me all the time." "But I need to prepare," Alice said. "Tutors, exams. I don't have money." "Why do you need a tutor when you have me?" Eleanor Smith visibly transformed from a frail old woman into an energetic teacher. "I taught economics for so many years. I'll prepare you so you'll get in without any problems, I promise." "Sarah and Robert told me about you," Alice smiled, "but you need rest." "Idleness is killing me," Eleanor Smith replied, "and you are a gift from fate. Finally, my experience will be useful to someone." Life in Eleanor Smith's house settled into a routine. Alice settled into the room with the gym equipment, a cozy sofa, a desk by the window for studying, even a laptop. In the evenings, they sometimes watched movies together, discussing and joking. Caring for Eleanor Smith turned out not to be so difficult. Yes, Alice took care of the house, cleaning, cooking. But Eleanor Smith herself, despite the severe stroke, tried to do a lot on her own. Sarah had warned that she would need help with hygiene, and Alice was a little apprehensive about this, but the hostess managed herself. She only needed help getting to the bathroom and back. Her self-discipline was astounding. She never forgot her pills, taking them on schedule. She made a training schedule for herself and followed it strictly. Every morning, sitting on the bed, she worked on her weakened arm and legs. It was difficult. Her face would turn red, sweat would appear on her forehead, but she stubbornly repeated the movements. This commanded deep respect. Eleanor Smith said she felt a surge of strength and claimed that the main thing was not to give up. Without movement, even a healthy person would wither as nature gets rid of the unnecessary. Alice found her reasoning interesting. She learned a lot from this intelligent, well-read woman. Sometimes Eleanor Smith was surprised by the gaps in Alice's knowledge. "Don't you take any interest in anything?" she would ask, assuming Alice didn't know elementary things about art or history. "But I was an A student," Alice would reply sheepishly. Next to Eleanor Smith, she felt like an ignoramus. But this was fixable. The house had a huge library. Alice started reading voraciously, immersing herself in books. Eleanor Smith also read a lot, and she compiled a study program for Alice for her exams so she could re-enroll in distance learning. They studied every day at the large table in the living room. Eleanor Smith never cancelled classes, even when she felt unwell, getting annoyed if Alice suggested postponing a lesson. She turned out to be a magnificent teacher. She knew how to explain complex things simply, sometimes scolding strictly, sometimes praising, but always achieving understanding. The knowledge settled in Alice's mind clearly and logically. "You have a talent," Alice once said. "You are an amazing teacher." Eleanor Smith blossomed from the praise and remembered how scared she was to give her first lecture to students, almost her peers. But she managed. Eleanor Smith lived for her work. Even after becoming a mother, she couldn't put her family first. "It's my fault that the children grew up like this," she confessed one day. "I should have paid more attention to them. But I bought them off with gifts, demanded success. I understand economics, but in child psychology, I'm a complete novice." Alice understood what she meant. Robert and Sarah visited their mother rarely, calling dutifully once a week, as if she were a stranger to them. Both had achieved success. Robert was a factory manager, Sarah was an engineer. Good positions, prosperity, families, attributes of success, cars, apartments, travel. Any mother could be proud. But with Eleanor Smith, things hadn't worked out. They fulfilled their duty. They didn't abandon her. They found a caregiver, albeit a distant relative. But they weren't going to sit with their mother themselves. During their rare visits, perfunctory questions, polite interest, and then quickly back to their busy lives. Alice initially couldn't understand such indifference. It was so unlike her relationship with her mother, where, despite poverty, there was always support and warmth. Here, it was as if they were strangers. Eleanor Smith herself admitted that she had spent little time with them. Both parents worked, the children grew up with grandmothers, gifts, trips. That was probably how they tried to compensate for the lack of communication. Work was always the priority. Children sometimes even annoyed her. They demanded attention, distracted her. Of course, she loved them, did everything for them, got scarce toys, paid for their hobbies, helped them get into university and find jobs. At some point, the relationship became transactional, Eleanor Smith sighed. "I noticed it too late. My daughter didn't share personal things. My son only talked about money. My husband was angry, called them selfish. Partially true, but we were also to blame." "I don't know," Alice shook her head. "My mum also worked a lot, didn't give expensive gifts, but we always cared for and understood each other. I don't think you're to blame." It was sad for her to listen. It seemed Eleanor Smith was justifying her children, taking the blame on herself. And there was maternal love in that too. And Sarah and Robert, yes, they seemed like spoiled egoists. Perhaps their fault was that from childhood they received everything without giving anything back, and grew up as consumers, convinced that everyone owed them something. Sarah considered her well-fed childhood difficult because her mother didn't always come to her performances. What did she know about real difficulties? About having to go to the store and cook dinner herself at 10 years old because Mum was tired after work? Alice, by the way, liked taking care of her mother. Mom. Thoughts of her brought back the sadness, how she missed her voice, her smile. Robert and Sarah didn't appreciate their happiness. They could visit their mother any time, but they didn't rush. Alice helped Eleanor Smith walk to the living room. Despite all her efforts, she was visibly weakening. The doctors Alice called just shrugged. Age, extensive stroke. It's good she's not bedridden. It pained Alice to see Eleanor Smith fading. She tried to stay strong, but she needed rest more often, and less often asked to be taken out to the garden. Alice reported this to Sarah and Robert. They sighed, repeating the doctor's words. Robert promised to arrange a stay in a sanatorium for his mother, looked for workarounds, but the matter dragged on. Alice suspected he wasn't trying very hard. On the TV screen, the characters of the series were arguing. Eleanor Smith followed them, but the hand holding the cup trembled noticeably. She was completely weak. Alice noted this with alarm. What to do? Doctors blamed it on age. Her children were indifferent. Suddenly, Eleanor Smith turned pale. Instantly, the cup dropped. Tea spilled. She clutched her head. The pain was severe. Now! Alice jumped up. I'll call an ambulance. There was no doubt this was serious. She didn't ask what hurt, just told the dispatcher. Stroke, losing consciousness, urgent. Hoping they would arrive faster that way. Returning, Alice saw that Eleanor Smith had vomited. She was sitting, pressing her hand to her forehead, bewildered and frightened. Alice had never seen her like this. Water? Alice asked, not knowing how to help. She shook her head. I called an ambulance. Thank you, Eleanor Smith mumbled in a weak, slurred voice. Looks like a stroke. They warned me. Everything will be all right. They're coming, Alice reassured her, hoping her words would give her strength. Just hold on. Girl, you're so good. Mary raised you well. Not like me. Even now she blamed herself for her children. Nonsense. They've achieved a lot. And you hold on. I have exams soon. We'll celebrate. You'll get in. Eleanor Smith smiled with a distorted mouth. And everything will work out for you. And, if anything, go up to the attic. There's a hiding place, a gift, near the dormer window. Nothing will happen. Alice didn't believe the part about the hiding place. It sounded like delirium. If nothing happens, good. But if, go up. You deserve it. Thank you for your care. I can't express it. I promise, Alice said. Just hold on. There was a knock at the door. The ambulance had arrived, the room filled with medics. All this reminded Alice of that terrible evening, but this time there was a chance. The paramedic told her to quickly pack some things. Eleanor Smith was being taken to the hospital, where they would help her. Alice hastily packed everything necessary into Eleanor Smith's old travel bag. She walked her to the car. It was scary to see her on the stretcher, but hope did not fade. The doctors arrived in time. They would help, and she would come home. But Eleanor Smith did not return. At 6 a.m, a call came from an unknown number. Alice understood everything immediately. An indifferent voice announced, Eleanor Smith had died in intensive care. The second stroke had been fatal. Alice hung up and slowly slid down the wall to the floor. The horror and inevitability of what was happening overwhelmed her. A black wave of despair surged to her throat. She had to call Sarah. In the confusion, Alice had left her own number, not thinking about the children's numbers. Now she had to tell them the terrible news. It was difficult. Sarah, upon hearing, gave a choked cry, her voice interrupted by sobs. She asked for details, found out the hospital, and then asked Alice to handle the funeral arrangements. "I can't get time off work," she explained. "We're swamped. Robert is on a business trip. He won't be back for 2 days. We don't have time. We'll give you the money, of course." After hanging up, Alice fell onto the bed and gave in to tears. She cried for a long time until she was exhausted. The tears brought a strange relief. Having washed her face, she forced herself to gather her thoughts. There was a lot to do. Outside the window, a grey autumn dawn was breaking. Sleep wouldn't come. The weight of loss pressed down. Suddenly, Alice remembered Eleanor Smith's insistent request about the attic, the hiding place, and the gift. Getting up, she went out into the cold hallway, shivered, and regretted not putting on the warm robe, a gift from Eleanor Smith for the new year. In the corner of the hallway stood an old wooden ladder leading to the attic. The square hatch in the ceiling was slightly ajar, without a lock. Alice pushed it, and it creaked open, showering her with dust and debris. It had been a long time since anyone had been up here. The attic was surprisingly warm and quiet. Dust motes danced in the rays of grey light from the dormer window. The air was filled with the scent of dried herbs. Bunches hung on ropes, probably collected for winter tea. Alice expected to see a cluttered, dusty place, but the attic was surprisingly clean and tidy. Signed boxes stood along the walls on makeshift shelves. Opening a box labelled Photos, she found old albums. Sitting on the floor, Alice began to leaf through them. Black and white pictures, a young Eleanor Smith, her husband, funny little Sarah and Robert. How did they become so indifferent? The family travelled a lot, photos against the backdrop of mountains, the sea, castles. To Alice, who had never even been out of town, it was incredibly interesting. An ordinary family, loving parents, children with them all over the world. What more could one need? Exploring the attic captivated her. It felt as if she had been transported to the past, to another world. Even her grief receded. In the box with Christmas decorations, she found wonderful old ornaments, little foxes, snowmen, icicles. Not cheap, mass-produced goods, but toys with soul. Alice took a glass snow maiden and a cotton snowman as keepsakes. Christmas was still far away, but this year she would have a tree, and these toys would take pride of place on it. Home. Where would she spend Christmas? She needed to find housing. It was good that she had managed to save a little. Thoughts of Eleanor Smith brought back the sadness. Alice remembered the hiding place, under the floorboard, near the dormer window. She went over, carefully pressed her foot. The floorboard creaked and lifted slightly. There. Carefully prying it up, Alice lifted it, revealing a niche. A box lay there, carved, wooden, lacquered, heavy. Alice placed it on the floor, opened the lid, and froze in astonishment. Inside were jewels, ancient, unusual, gold earrings with sapphires, heavy chains, a necklace with red stones, rubies, a dragonfly brooch with blue eyes, sapphires. Alice was no expert, but she understood. If this wasn't fake, it was a fortune. A gift? But Eleanor Smith couldn't have left her this. At the bottom of the box lay an envelope. Alice took out a folded sheet, written in a neat hand. She immersed herself in reading. Only my husband and I knew about this story. Now I alone keep this secret, and have decided to write it down to tell you where these jewels came from. It was in the last century, a difficult time. We survived as best we could. A student from France, Paul, came to our college on an exchange. Talented, passionate about science, I liked him immediately. I was his teacher. After graduation, he was supposed to take a high position in a large firm. He was ready, driven, quick to grasp everything. Paul defended his thesis brilliantly and started working. The position was enviable, the prospects brilliant. We rarely communicated. We were both workaholics. I didn't even notice he had disappeared from view. Working, I thought. But one day his father, Jean, called me. He was in despair. He said his son had been framed. He was in prison, awaiting sentence. He begged for help. I realized the matter was serious. The desperate father didn't know where else to turn. Of course, I immediately took it upon myself. I had connections, former students, colleagues in various structures. I managed to figure it out, to uncover a carefully planned crime. The police wouldn't have dug so deep. There was too much evidence against Paul. The case looked obvious. He was masterfully framed, given incorrect data, signatures were forged. He was accused of embezzlement. Fortunately, Paul, honest and a little naive, managed to gather his own evidence. He was acquitted. He went home. He didn't want to stay in Russia. About a month later, Jean flew to see me. I wasn't expecting him. He thanked me with tears, shook my hand, hugged me. He said I could turn to him at any moment. He would do anything for me. And he gave me this box, family jewels, passed down in their lineage. I refused, but he was very persistent. In confirmation of legality, he gave me a deed of gift. That's the whole story. I decided to hide the jewels and tell no one. Times were like that. We weren't in need of money, but who knows, maybe someday they would help our family out. So they lay in the hiding place under the floorboard for many years. The person reading these lines is worthy of this gift, since I have revealed this secret to them. Alice read the letter in one breath. A real detective story. This was what Eleanor Smith was like. Not just a teacher, but a fighter for justice, ready to help a stranger. In the box lay another document, written in French. Alice didn't know the language, but the paper looked official, with seals. Probably the deed of gift, or a confirmation of authenticity. Alice looked at the jewels again. They seemed very old, true witnesses of centuries. Who had worn them? How had these women lived? No, Alice thought, this beauty cannot belong to me. Eleanor Smith was probably not entirely herself when she spoke of the gift. These family heirlooms, like the house, should go to her children. The thought that Eleanor Smith was no longer alive squeezed her heart again. Alice carefully closed the box and hid it back in the hiding place. It was time to go downstairs and start preparing for the funeral. Alice handled the funeral arrangements. The send-off was dignified. Many people came. Eleanor Smith was known and respected. Sarah and Robert received condolences. Returning to the empty house, Alice, despite her exhaustion, couldn't believe it for a long time. The weight of loss pressed down. In the morning, Sarah arrived. "Thanks for your help," she said, handing her an envelope. "Payment, and for your troubles." "Thank you," Alice nodded. "You need to vacate the house by Monday," Sarah continued. "We've already found tenants." Alice was ready. Her things were packed. Over the weekend, she had found a small apartment near the university. Moving out was a little sad. Without Eleanor Smith, the house felt alien. But she quickly managed. 2 bags were enough. Alice re-enrolled in distance learning, just as she had planned. And she found a job, as an assistant accountant, as Eleanor Smith had advised. The salary wasn't large, but together with her savings, it was enough. 6 months passed. Alice often remembered Eleanor Smith, her wisdom and support. She was grateful to fate for this meeting, short as it was. It was March, the eve of a holiday. The weather was gloomy, grey sky, snow. She longed for sun and warmth. Returning home after a shortened day, Alice found an envelope at her door, a notification. At home, she opened the letter. It was from a notary. She was invited to the reading of Eleanor Smith's will on March 9th. Alice immediately remembered the box. Her heart pounded. Could it be? But it was a fortune. No, it must be for the children. Maybe something from the things for her? A washing machine, perhaps. At the appointed hour, she sat in the notary's office. Sarah and Robert were there. Alice didn't want to see them. Sarah tried to be friendly, but her eyes betrayed irritation. Robert didn't hide his displeasure at all. The notary began reading the will. The children received a substantial inheritance, the house, an apartment, cars, the result of their parents' labour. The children smiled contentedly, everything divided equally. And now about the inheritance of Alice Miller, the notary announced. Sarah and Robert froze. What was this? Alice felt their gazes. Eleanor Smith asked me to give you this letter. The notary handed Alice an envelope. Everything is in there. What's in there? Sarah reached out her hand, her eyes gleaming. The client's will is confidential, the notary cut her off. The young lady will read it herself. You'll tell us, won't you? Sarah feigned a smile again. Alice, without replying, left. Alice went up to the technical floor, a quiet, dusty refuge. She didn't want to wait until she got home. Leaning against the wall, she unfolded the letter. Alice, my dear girl, it began. If you are reading this, I am gone. Thank you for your warmth and care. It is so important. You will understand later. You are wonderful, kind, smart, strong. You have an inner core. You will achieve much. But it is difficult alone, without connections, money, support. I know. Therefore, I want to give you a gift. You will handle it correctly. In the hiding place in the attic, by the dormer window, there is a box. It contains jewels, a fortune. But you will read everything in more detail later in the will, which should be in the envelope. They are yours. You are worthy. I asked the notary not to announce this in front of the children. They already received a lot, but they would have tried to sue. It's my own fault for raising them like that. Be happy. Stay as kind as you are. Thank you for filling my last days with light. Alice lowered the letter, smiling through her tears, as if she had heard Eleanor Smith's voice. How she missed her. So, it was true. The treasures were hers. Poverty was in the past. No longer did she need to count every penny to make ends meet. She would have to get used to this. Alice took a deep breath. Eleanor Smith believed in her, believed that she would succeed and remain kind. Alice could not let her down.